Passing Thoughts of a Firefighter by F.J.Bates, Chapter 8. New Quarters. The captain in charge of headquarters called me into his office and stated, "I thought you would like to know that you're being transferred to Ladder 2. I just listened as he continued. The general order, which will make it official, will be out on Friday. I thanked him for the advance notice of leaving the crew of Engine 1. Whether I wanted to stay at headquarters did not matter, as the order was that I was assigned to Ladder 2 come Sunday. The work done by the crew of a ladder company is altogether different from that of an engine company. I actually had to start fresh, as the duties of a hosman were not the same. Engine companies take the hydrants, lay the lines to the fire, and advance the hose to the interior of the building. When a line is going to be laid, the hydrant is spotted and the work of a hosman begins. As long as water is being passed, the crew of the engine company stays at the scene. The functions of a ladder company at the fire scene include rescue, laddering the building, forcible entry, ventilation, salvage, opening up, overhauling, and elevated streams. At the Ladder 2 station, the officers and crew were well trained in every evolution. All of them had been with the truck for such a long time that one could consider them experts in the trade. It was indeed a challenge, as there had been no personnel changes at the station for some time. For a boot, still wet, behind the ears, to report to this house on this day naturally would arouse resentment. That I did as soon as I stepped in the door. Ladder 2 House was a 2-story wooden building located on Bridge Street. It was built in the late 1800s, and that time it housed 2 horse-drawn ladder trucks. After the reorganization of the department, Ladder 1 was relocated on Upper Essex Street at the Engine 4 house. Ladder 2 had been a 2-door house to accommodate the 2 pieces, but it reverted back to a 1-door house with just the American LaFrance ladder truck in quarters. The memories of this house are many, and just recently, this station had been removed completely. A parking lot had been constructed on the site. Ladder 2 had been consolidated with Engine 6 located on Fort Avenue. On the day that I reported, the captain of the truck was on duty. He was from that old school, very stern. The night shift, as well as the incoming shift, were waiting for the roll call. As the signal was given for the calling of the roll, I took my place at the end of the line. I could feel the captain's eyes checking my appearance for any flaws. However, I took pride in my uniform and knew that he would have difficulty in observing an infraction. I passed inspection. Following the roll, the captain asked, "Do you have a license to drive?" I answered, "Yes, sir." "You'll drive both ends," the captain stated. Again, I said, "Yes, sir." Before the morning had passed, arrangements had been made to teach me the operation of the tiller. The tiller man sits on a small seat located at the rear of the truck and controls the length of the apparatus from the turnable back to where he steers just above the rear wheels. The length of this truck was approximately 55 feet. It had a 75-foot wooden aerial ladder in two sections. The operating mechanism for raising the aerial was located at the base of the aerial, just behind the front seat. There was an overhang of 15 feet of ladder beyond the tillerman. The tillerman was located about 8 feet from the ground, directly over the ladder. This truck had a tiller wheel 3 feet in diameter that fitted over a shaft vertically into the packing box of the rear axle. The wheel was held on by a cotter pin, and when the aerial was to be raised, one had to pull the cotter pin, which had a chain connected to it, lift the wheel off the top of the shaft, and place the wheel on a hook provided on the ladder frame. The shaft would be pulled up and laid horizontally. Sorry. While this was being explained, I could not help but think of how nice it was on the rear of a pumper. No worries except holding on tight. Here I was getting instructions on the duties of a tillerman. Climbing up to the seat and sitting with each hand on the tiller wheel, I was told by Jim Cohn to look straight down the ladder to the windshield. Windshield had two sections of glass, one on each side of a center strip in the middle. Jim, who was the regular tillerman and the best, as well as top ladderman, was my instructor. Jim is still on the job today. A little bit older, but still tops in my book. His duties now are to aid the chief. It was my good fortune to become associated with Big Jim, as he was a perfect teacher in all evolutions of ladder work and firefighting. We worked together for 4 years on Ladder 2, and following Jim up and down roofs, sometimes I used to think that even the angels would fear to tread the paths that my instructor took. He had the agility of a mountain goat. Looking between the spars of the aerial ladder, it seemed like a long way to that windshield, Jim explained. You watch to keep the truck straight. The push button was explained. 1 to stop, 2 to go, 3 to back up. This was the only communication between the driver and the tillerman. When all the fundamentals were fully explained, the captain decided to take the truck out for my indoctrination. Martin Red Hughes was the driver and one great guy. Red retired a few years back and is now deceased. With the likes of Red in a fire station, the day was always fully enjoyed. It was indeed a pleasure to be on the same shift as Red and Jim. The captain stayed by himself at times, but would on various occasions mix in. Usually Red would end this as he loved to needle the captain. So Jim and I climbed up to the tiller and the signal was given, and out we went. The truck turned left as it approached the apron, and by doing so, it had a tendency to pull the running board toward the door jamb. This is adjusted by turning the tiller wheel just a little to the right. This position is held until the tiller wheels clear the door. Then the overhanging aerial ladder is watched until it also is free. Out in the traffic, truck straight, slow speed, another left turn into a side street, and back to quarters. Backing in requires the tiller wheels to be turned in the direction of the door, whereas the driver turns his wheel just the opposite direction so he can swing the front in over to a point. When this point is reached, the truck just glides into the station. This completed my driving test, and jumping down from the tiller with relief, I was greeted by the captain with, "You're a full-fledged tillerman." Apparently, I did not show that I was a nervous wreck, as when backing in, I thought that the overhang was heading right for the side of the building. Luckily, Jim was controlling the wheel. We straightened out just in time. There were 2 regular drivers of the ladder truck, so I was very happy to ride on the side until I could become more experienced. Well, one day it is pouring cats and dogs, and as I reported for duty, the captain said, "Take the tiller. Jim is out sick." The butterflies started a rumpus in my tummy. I was hoping the alarm would not ring, and if it did, perhaps it would be a ladder 1 box. If we had to go, it would be my first solo flight. Well, it did hit. There was a Ward 5 alarm coming in. Ladder 2 responded to a call from the box located at the intersection of Raymond Road and Raymond Avenue. This would take us right through the townhouse square, going against traffic until we hit Lafayette Street. My black watch cap on my rubber coat not yet fastened, I gave the signal that I was up there. Trying to remember all the things that Jim had told me, I suddenly realized that we had cleared the door and were making the turn into traffic. The strong wind opened my coat so it would appear that I had wings. I could not take my hand off the wheel to fasten the coat, and as a result, the cold rain was forming a puddle in my lap. Heading for the square against traffic, my eyes were glued to the middle of the windshield to keep steering the truck straight. My hands were frozen on the wheel. At times, Red would have to maneuver the front end to clear the other cars, and I would do the same at the tiller. If we hit a depression in the street with the wheel of the truck, the tiller was forced to go in that direction. Unknown to the captain, there were several close calls, as the rear end would sway like a whip at an amusement park. And finally, we reached the box location, and temporary relief was in sight. We had made it even though I was soaking wet, as I had forgot to pull my boots up. With the coat wide open also, I could not have been any wetter. During the return to quarters, no difficulty was experienced, possibly because we were going much slower. Changed my clothes, the sun came out, I felt good. I did not think that the alarm would hit again, and Jim would be back on the next tour. Well, the fast time tapper came alive. Box 21, Essex and Central Streets. This was a short run to the business area via St. Peter Street to Essex Street. We made the turn into St. Peter Street and headed for Essex Street. This is a narrow street and a sharp turn for the truck to make. It was decided to ride the left side of the St. Peter Street so when the truck reached the corner, it would be easier to make the turn. So not following the center windshield marker, the tiller moved over by cutting the wheels a little to the left. I cut my wheels to the left as Jim turned to the right. It worked just perfectly as we reached the corner and turned into Essex Street. I was elated at this point and decided that perhaps the same procedure could be used to turn into Central Street. The streets in this city are very narrow. A ladder truck has to be maneuvered around corners. The driver and the tillermans work as a team. I was starting to learn I had to at this point. I looked down the street, hoping to pull the tiller over the right side so I would be way out when Red made the left turn. My luck did not hold, as parked on the right side opposite Central Street was a dang bus. Sitting on the left curb was a little old bearded gentleman selling catnip by the bag, his two legs dangling in the street. The front end approached the corner and made the turn. The tiller was still 30 feet away, and all I could see was the bus. At this point, I had visions of the overhang cleaning out every window in the bus as the turn was made. As the tiller wheels were cut and the turn was made, the ladder was just cleared the roof of the bus. My eyes were amazed to see the ladder slowly moving over the roof. All the passengers were looking out, probably wishing that they could be on the tiller. I was wishing that I could be on the bus. Looking down, I saw the left tiller wheel cleared the bearded catnip man. We were home free. Ladder 2 was a house that was full of pride. The equipment was always polished to the highest gleam. Axes were always clean. There were never any rust. The truck was forever waxed, and it looked it. The house, old as it was kept spotless. Each man did his share to keep it this way. As a result, a very close bond was always present. There were nights when we returned from a fire with so much snow that not one piece of equipment could be seen. In a short time, the truck and all the tools would look as good as before the response. This would be done by using hoses, chamois, and towels, and it took the rest of the night. It would get done. Ladder 2 was a station by itself, and the crew was a little independent. Perhaps they knew they were their top company, and rightfully so. If the chief wanted to speak to one of them for some infraction, the captain would be there first. And the chief knew that he would lock horns with the captain before he would speak to the man. I'm sorry, but that is amazing leadership. This is awesome. We had a horseshoe pitching court set up in the side yard. At night, just after roll call, the on-duty crew and friends would throw shoes until darkness set in. So many happy hours were spent on that court. There was a large garden in which all types of crops were grown. The dinners included these delicious fresh vegetables all summer. The same care that was given to the house and apparatus was also given to the garden. Frank McInnes was the cook, and none were any better. Mac is still on the job, putting on the 6-course meals at the Engine 6 house. I recall that over a ton of horse manure was delivered to the station one day, just before the end of winter. It was to be used as a hotbed for starting vegetable seedlings. The storm windows would cover the boxes, so the seedlings would benefit from the heat of the manure. The manure was left in a pile, and we waited a week for some sign that the manure was ready to be placed in the hotbed. No such sign was forthcoming. We even went out and felt the outside crust for warmth. It seemed that it was ice cold and it could not be used in the state for the purpose intended. 1 ton of horse poop. We decided to contact Essex County Agricultural School for advice. This was done immediately. Using the next door phone, the school was contacted. Our problem was explained to them and information requested. In no time, a representative was down. He could not believe that our problem could exist. On this day, it had been raining quite hard. The representative borrowed a rubber coat and a pitchfork, went to the pile, watched him drive the fork into the pile. In no time at all, steam covered the area. We spent the afternoon shoveling. I might add that our faces were quite red. As I mentioned before, the captain was very stern. And as I was still considered the boot, I had to be on guard. There were no shortcuts. If I tripped up, I usually heard from him. However, with time, I was getting used to his ways. I would try to do everything right. However, on one cold wintry night, a box alarm was received. We had a steam boiler to heat the station with no thermostat. There was no cellar, only a deep pit to the house. The boiler, so the floors were always cold. The boiler fire was usually banked at night. As I was assigned to ride the side of the truck, my job was to stand by, close the door manually after the truck was just outside the station. This involved pulling down by the rope and stepping on the bottom until the pins were engaged in the track. When the click was heard, it meant the door was secured. After this, I would hop up on the side of the truck and the tillerman would signal the front by buzzer to proceed. On this particular cold, windy night, after the truck was out, the door was pulled down and secured. As I jumped aboard, the signal was given by the tillerman that all was okay. We started to roll. Looking back, I can still see the apparatus slowly rising to the open position. There was no doubt that I had not properly secured it. Shielding my face against the cutting cold wind, I was wondering if the captain had a sense of humor. I really hoped so, as I knew he was going to be a little upset when we returned to a very cold station.